Welcome to today's episode, the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. It's Friday, June 20th, the same day that Jaws came out in 1975. And you know what they say about Jaws? It's a spiritual successor to Hell Motel. The show we'll be talking about today has nothing to do with Hell Motel. What do you think theaters were like back then? I imagine people...
Probably a lot smaller.
The audiences, I think, were probably a lot more well-behaved. I just saw the Mission Impossible film, and that audience was horrible.
Talkers in the background.
People had their phones out, people were talking, and it was just like, I know that it's cool when you see something in a big crowd, but not when everybody's expressing what they think is going to happen next in the movie while you're watching
The
it.
theater literally tells you to put your phone away right before the movie starts, and people still just ignore that.
You remember a few years ago when AMC, the CEO, was trying to tell people that they were going to start implementing this thing where you could take out your phones, and then there was this huge backlash.
God, yeah.
That gave me faith in humanity that maybe going forward people would be more polite. Maybe after the pandemic it would get better, but it actually got worse. It seems like anybody who's still going to the movies thinks it's their own private time to spend surfing the internet, you know?
What do you think of the actual movie?
The movie was okay. It's a Tom Cruise film. I'm not a huge Tom Cruise fan, but I do think it was better than the previous Mission Impossible, though I do know that the reviews were worse.
Yeah, a little worse.
It's still considered a good movie, though, right?
Yep,
yeah.
80%.
So Hell Motel is the TV show that we're talking about today, and I watched the first 2 episodes, and my expectations going in, we originally were thinking about not doing this show because the advertisement was that you had 10 huge horror buffs going in and staying one night at this haunted hotel franchise. I thought it was going to be like a docu-series, like a reality show series,
reality show,
where you
right.
had actual ghost hunter TV show podcasters, real people who do that for a living, going in and staying one night, and you have a guest celebrity host.
So the YouTuber reality show that came out a couple years ago, where all those YouTubers, and it was like a whodunit type of thing.
I didn't know it was actually a scripted show for the longest time, and then I heard Hell Motel, and I'm like, well, that's very similar to Hotel Trivago. I don't think that would have been cool if they got that guy in there to be the host.
Ted Williams or something, I think his name was.
You know his name? I haven't seen him forever. Or it could be like Gordon Ramsay's Hell's Kitchen. This is just like a spin-off of that. But no, it's created by the same people who did Slasher back in the day.
Slasher, yep. And people are there's high speculation this was supposed to be Slasher season 6. And then for some reason they just dropped the name and then made it a limited series.
It would make sense because that was an anthology series. I remember watching the first season, then it jumped onto Netflix for a while. I think it started off as on Chiller, and then it moved to Shudder. This is on Shudder. I can't name more than 3 shows on Shudder right now.
Well, I actually have a little bit of the history of Shudder. Do you know anything about it?
Other than the basics, no.
It just celebrated its 10-year anniversary, March 31st, 2025. AMC wanted to dip their toes into horror streaming services in 2015. So it started off as an invite-only type of beta in the US in 2015. 2016, it rolls out internationally. It was okay in terms of horror selection, around 200 titles. But 2017 introduces short-form exclusives. It garners even more titles. And then 2018, that's when it became big when they introduced live events. Specifically, The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. He's a famous horror host. And one particular live event where he does commentary for Tourist Trap and Sleepaway Camp, the server becomes so big that it crashes multiple times.
I don't know what it is about Sleepaway Camp, but people are obsessed with that franchise.
It has the biggest twist, I think, of all time in it or something.
I only heard about it on How Did This Get Made?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then back in 2019, the first scripted original series Creep Show premieres on the platform, and it has a record-breaking launch. 54% of Shudder subscribers watched it during its opening weekend. It brings in a record number of Shudder members in the first 2 weeks and accumulates a huge number of minutes watched. And then in 2020, it passes 1 million subscribers. In 2021, VHS 94 was also released on the site and is the most watched premiere at the time. And of course, like we've already mentioned, Stalker 2021, they make season 4 and then even made a season 5 in 2023. And after 5 years of us doing this podcast until now, I think that Slasher was the only show we ever did that was on Shudder.
Which is interesting because we've done Chucky, And like it just feels like we've done other horror shows, but they all fell into the sci-fi camp.
Right.
We've definitely done other AMC shows, but yeah. So I had seen the first season of Slasher way back in the day. I didn't recognize who they brought over for this season, but that's just because it's been so long.
They bought back a lot of people. Paula Brancotti, Jim Watson, Genevieve DeGraves, and Eric McCormack. That's 4 people
Yeah,
already.
Paula Brancotti is like the main character of the show. She plays Paige, and she's the she in the show is playing a has-been actress who was in a horror franchise, a la Screamish, who now has to take gigs, kind of like doing these cheap, like fun things in order for people to still enjoy her presence.
That's very interesting that she's the main character because I don't remember the episodes that I watched of Slasher, but I do remember that David Cronenberg was in it, and Eric McCormack, definitely the biggest name, plays Hemingway in this. Did you recognize where he's from?
Yeah, no, he's the Travelers dude, and I'll get to like why. So the whole way that like horror tropes and horror series play out in a very similar manner, this is following that same format. It's definitely the Harper's Island meets the Menu. Like you wouldn't think that those two would converge, but it does in the first episode because he's a chef.
Yeah.
So yeah, just finishing off my expectations for the show. I saw the cover of it. I saw that there was a guy or girl in a mask with antlers, and that was probably the murderer. And he's just behind a check-in counter, and it's like ominous, and there's this red light and stuff. And so I'm like, okay, whatever. It's the on one condition trope where characters have to spend one night or at least one night in a haunted place and see if they survive. That's sort of what happens. You have all these horror junkies, influencers, authors, academics, actresses. They all join up to go to the reopening of a hotel where they had this slaughter that happened hotel, motel. Way back in the day, 30 years ago in the autumn of 1995. And to me, it feels like watching horror films, especially on a shoestring budget, which can be successful. I really like shows like Blood Drive, Death Valley, mostly for their comedy, and Misfits. They're still capable of doing good things.
Did
So
Blood
it's
Drive have I thought Blood Drive had a huge budget, at least for what it was.
no, I'm pretty sure that that was a pretty low budget. They just were able to do a lot with it. Yeah, but it's like watching baseball, honestly. So,
Baseball.
yeah, for some people, it's very boring because it's so predictable. It's the same stuff every time. You know the rules of the game. You know the players, the positions. There's always going to be one like it's the cabin in the woods effect. You have a girl who like sleeps around. You have the virgin. You have like the jock. You have like
The
that type of
asshole, usually.
yeah, you have the dick. It's just interesting though that it's transcended into like a lot of true crime enthusiasts are the ones who are now the victims here. So there's a binary line whether or not they're going to win or lose. Just like in baseball, they're going to be either alive or dead at the end of the series. I can already make my predictions on who's going to survive. It seems like Paige has the highest chance, but there's always also the chance, like in baseball, of having some crazy twist at the end, something that's always on the realm of possibility. But in order to pull off, you'd have to hit like 5 home runs to come back in the ninth. And it's just, and it ends up working out.
Right, so you mentioned true crime. I was interested because is this trying to be, like, based on a true story or Only Murders in the Building, like Midnight Gospel, where they take, like, a podcast
Sort
and
of.
try to make something of it?
Right. One of the people who was invited to the grand reopening of this place called the Cold River, and it's this couple that have decided to buy this place and make it into an amusement park of sorts. And so they've like rigged up all the victims from the murders 30 years ago. Like they get these artists to recreate their rooms in the styles that they were murdered in. And then they have this whole like weekend planned out for these influencers so that they're able to promote the hotel for people to come in afterwards and just enjoy their stay.
That's very Glass Onion, it feels like.
Yeah, sort of, except that they weren't trying to like that Glass Onion, they weren't trying to promote the
Right,
property, right?
right, this is to get people to actually go
Yeah,
there,
it's a
though.
publicity stunt. And so the first episode is all about just introducing us to every personality that they drive in there in their hearse, and then learning who like leaves first. And the person who leaves first in all of these films is always going to be the most famous person
Yep.
on the cast, and that's Eric McCormick. So by the end of the first episode, he's dead.
Will from Will and Grace, yeah, and he even said that this is in the same family, same universe as Slasher. So
Yeah, no, that would make sense. So he plays a chef named Hemingway, and all the people come in this hearse except for Hemingway. You have, let's see, Paige, you have Blake, you have Andy, Crow, who is the spiritualist, Adriana, who slept with 11 serial killers, and she's looking to make it a dozen
right,
pretty soon.
I wasn't sure if I read that
That's her claim to
correctly.
fame. She's an influencer. She also seduces the podcaster in the second episode because the podcaster happens to have gone into a kind of happy face killer style where he was part of a slaughter that happened. I guess it was called like the Sigma something slaughter, which makes me think it was at a university, which makes it think like he survived one of those attacks when he was a college student
Right.
and he decided to start podcasting about it. And then there's Kawayan, who is this artist who is one of the people who rigged out the rooms. And then you have Floyd and Shirley, who show up in their RV because the weather's so bad. And we learn very early on that those two are the real killers.
Right, so they are that's supposed to be like a twist at the end of the episode because
It
didn't
was
they?
so instantly noted. Like as soon as those characters came in, and I was like, oh, these are just the first two later. So I have to describe the first scene.
Right, okay.
The first episode's called Bloodbath. The first scene takes place in 1995. You have this couple, Joey and Caitlin. They're just married, and they check in, and there's this shady guy behind the counter. He's literally like acting like he doesn't work there. Like he just is performing a heist that he just killed some people in the back. And lo and behold, this woman comes up next to him, and they both give the newlywed couple not only free champagne, but also the room number 7. They go to room number 7. They hear a knock on the door. It's the champagne. It's getting ready. And then they're murdered because and we just find out that those people, those two that were at the front desk, had murdered 6 others. They were the ones and they were conducting some sort of ritual sacrifice for this Baphomet.
Oh, are they in a cult?
Yes, sort of. And so what they're trying to recreate now, 30 years in the future, is that they're showed up in their RV, and it's just very coincidental timing that it's raining so bad that everybody is trapped there. I don't know how they planned that, but they were able to convince the hotel hosts who didn't want them to linger around there that they had to stay there, and now they're just going to weed off these people. However, we learned by the end of the first episode that they are not the reason why the chef was murdered, why Hemingway dies. Hemingway dies in a very final destination way.
Oh, is it like string of events?
It's disgusting. So like he goes into a sauna and then he's trapped in there by a serial killer. So it's not like just spontaneously, but there's another serial killer on the loose as well as the original 2 from back in the day. So we have 3 killers at least, and we're going to figure out who's who as the story goes on.
You say discussing the Daily Beast title there review, Hotel Motel is a horror series gore hounds have been waiting for.
Yeah, it's again like in the same vein as Harper's Island, where every week you could check off who survives and who doesn't and how they survive. This guy, because he bakes to death in a sauna, and literally it's ironic because when he's introduced, he's the chef and he's done an is it cake type meal where everybody is served something that looks like a human body part.
Right, he calls it something though, right? Or am I skipping an episode? Doesn't he say like a name for
Well, he's
it?
dead,
Like,
so I don't think you're
yeah.
skipping an episode, but he does then also serve them his blood. So they all drink shots of his blood without knowing at first. They think it's a joke, and then they
Oh,
find out
okay.
it
So,
actually.
but he actually refers to it as that.
Yeah, it's his blood. And then he shows them where he actually tapped his own vein. And so by the end, when he's actually the one who gets cooked alive, and then they go in there and to take him out, and Ruby like tugs his arm because they're trying to drag him out of this hot sauna before he just bakes even
Yeah.
further. And his arm just completely degloves because he's been in there for a couple hours at 270 degrees. And so like his meat just comes right off that flesh.
It's like the pit with the leg in the first episode.
Yeah, it's like the pit. And so that's when her partner slash, like, I think it's her wife decides, Portia, she's just like, I'm out of this. You're the one who's been such a big aficionado of the horror industry. And so she takes a sleeping pill and she's the next victim. That happens in the second episode. They get into a big fight, Ruby and Portia, and it's revealed that Portia was never really wanting to buy Bates Motel. So when Ruby's trying to like convince her that things are okay, despite the fact that there's a dead body there, Portia, yeah, she doesn't really have it too much else to do character development wise other than just die.
Well, okay, so how many people of the 10 are alive by the end of the 2 episodes?
Well, it's interesting that you say 10 because if you count them all, Hemingway won, Portia, Paige, Blake, Andy, Crow, Adriana, Floyd, Kawaiian, Ruby, Shirley.
Okay, more people, yeah.
Yeah, that's including the RV couple. You also have to take into account that I saw a doorman in the very first episode who I haven't seen since. So I'm not exactly sure if you're just counting the influencers, the invitees, plus the main two hosts.
I think it was just the invitees, because
Yeah,
what I read
plus
was
the hosts.
right, yeah.
Yes. And then in that case, there's just been 2 bodies and there's 8 to go. I do think that Floyd and Shirley are on the chopping block, though. The 2 killers from the original time. Like, there's no way that they aren't going to eventually be hunted by the hunter. You know?
Okay, and so out of all of them, who was your favorite character, and are they dead?
Oh, no. So, like, Eric McCormick, most famous dude, I enjoyed him in Travelers. Not my favorite character here. He was playing it over the top. He was flirting with the, like, sex serial killer lady too much. Like, it was weird. I would probably say my favorite character out of this crew is Ruby, only because I we know that she's not the killer, like, I'm 90% sure of that, and B, like, I think she has an unlikely chance of surviving. She's, obsessed with horror, but not as obsessed as some of these other people. Like, Adriana is the it girl. She is the I can fix her
Mhm.
girl that you absolutely cannot fix. Like, she is deranged. She is not someone like, as soon as she has sex with the podcast dude, she starts going on a tangent about how they should kill everybody else, and she is, like, 90% serious. She is a psychopath, and yes, she's pretty, but no, don't even try, like, you be running away from her if you can. Crow, I think, is supposed to be sort of the hero-looking figure because by episode 2, he goes from being someone who's just conducting seances to saying, "I wanna get out of here, and I don't trust this Floyd guy." Floyd is the murderer from the original series 30 years earlier, and so he is the one who's most on tap with who's good and who's bad. I just don't think he's gonna survive very long. And then Blake, the podcaster, I recognize him mostly from his couple episodes on Expanse, but also on Killjoys. He was in both of those. But
He's
I haven't.
also a drummer and part of a band.
Good for him. Andy is supposed to be this like professor dude who has cold feet. Like, he's not there for all this horror stuff that's going down. He feels like he's the most likely to actually be the killer in my mind because they make him out to be sort of a wimp. And there was one scene at the early part where he asked to see Ruby's phone and he's like, "I don't trust you. Let me see your phone." And he takes it and then he gives it back to her like immediately. He's like, "There's nothing on it." And that's the type of scene where you'll see that at the end and they'll be like, "Oh, he actually did something to the phone."
Right,
during that time."
downloaded an app or
Otherwise,
something.
there's really no point in him having that line other than they were just trying to pad airtime. Paige is like the low key possible killer because like she was presented as the main character in the first
Right.
episode, and we know that her career has taken a downturn and that everybody knows it because like she was part of the original Doom service, which was the series of movies that was based on this murder that everybody's there to hang out with or to see, the
Yeah.
Cold River slaughter at the Cold River Motel, and she's been recast as in this like reboot that they've done. And so
She feels betrayed.
she feels betrayed, but she's also in her mid to late 30s. She understands why she was recast. She just didn't want to be. And so she has the most like vengeance behind her. Maybe she's come back to like show everybody that she's not just a victim. I don't know. There's a possibility.
You said main character in the first episode. Does it changes
The
characters
second
in the
episode
second?
is interesting the way that they formulate it. They find the dead body and immediately everyone gets hungry. Like everybody goes for the kitchen. I don't know why. They're all famished. And so the podcaster is eating a sandwich when what's her name? When Adriana decides to solicit him for sex. The Andy guy, the writer, he's eating. Crow is eating. Like everybody's just hungry. They see a charred up body and they're just like,
Like a zombie.
Yeah, no, but everybody just links up in different ways. So Crow and Andy start talking to each other. They gain a friendship. And then you see Floyd and Shirley, now that we know that they were the original killers, they're like, hey, we didn't even kill that other dude. And then their RV explodes, which they do plan because they want to show a reason why they need to check in themselves. So I think they plan that. And then outside it's still raining and there's wolves outside. And that's when Crow decides that he's going to go off and save everybody. Floyd clocks that Crow is leaving. He starts to follow him with his machete and then ends up being saved because Andy follows both of them saying, hey, wait before you leave. And so that's when Floyd decides not to kill anybody at that moment. At the same time, I guess you get one scene with Kawayan and Shirley as well. Kawayan is the artist who prepared the last room with the death of Joey and Caitlin, the two original victims, the newlyweds, and so he's just destroying that thing because he doesn't feel like his artwork is good. Now that he's actually witnessing murders, I don't know exactly what's going on with that.
I'd probably get a mental state.
And you can kind of tell now, like everybody's pairing off. And then Portia and Ruby, of course, have their argument. The only one who's really not shown is Paige. That's what makes me a little suspicious of whether or not she could be the bad guy.
Overall, what are some of your pros and cons for the show?
Pros are that it is a traditional horror setup that you can tune in every weekend if you're not there for the acting ability or the budget. You're going to enjoy yourself. It's not bad. It's kind of a throwback to the yesteryear horror TV shows, and I like that. The cons are the same thing. Like it's not going to be any better than those things back then. You could stick on Harper's Island and you're going to enjoy it just as much. You could stick on another season of Shudder's slasher and you'd enjoy that just as much. I do have a few questions, some of which I've already talked about. Like, how did they know it was going to be raining so bad? Where did the doorman go? Why did Andy take the phone? And who is Baphomet? Like, I understand that is a famous, 19 or 1300s spirit. There's like a background to this. They didn't just make up that character. Why does he need 9 sacrifices and what portal is going to be open? Because that's what Floyd and Shirley are there for. They're trying to do a sacrifice again and bring this entity outside. The comedy, I would say that some of it works, some of it doesn't. You get the line, "I'm too hot to die," which that worked for the Doom Service, which was the movie that was based on the murder. That like it's very meta in that way, I guess.
Right.
But no one's ever looking at the camera and talking to it directly, so at least we don't get that.
No fourth wall breaking.
It is kind of funny what I was talking about with just the way that the meat falls off his body, the way that the characters act, the fact that they're all there under the pretense that they're in love with hearing about horror, learning about horror. It's kind of like After Party.
Interesting.
Because, you just have a cool set of personalities, but in the end, they kind of fall back to one trait about that character. Yeah. And then Adriana is just such a weird, like they had a 5-minute scene of her and the podcaster doing everything possible, simulating sex without actually showing anything too gratuitous that they could get away with. So like she was putting handcuffs on the dude and she was like grinding on top of him and then taking off his shirt to see where he had been stabbed before.
Of course, that's always
he
a
loves
thing.
to bring up the amount of times that he is afraid of knives. He had been stabbed before, and then she takes out a knife, and that's when he's like freaking out, and he's like, let me go, and then she cuts him, and you're like, what are we watching right now? Like, there's a little bit of humor in that.
If I had to guess your rating, I would say it's like a 5 out of 10.
6 out of 10.
Oh, 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
Okay, so it passes.
It passes. I will check in at the end of this series to see who won. Kind of like a baseball game, It's like you watch the first inning, you're seeing how the game's going, nothing too spectacular. But if by the 9th inning you see something crazy, you might want to rewind. and check out the seventh inning, see what happened there. Like, how did this person die, or how did this even happen?
It's going to be 8 episodes. They shot it in Toronto, Ontario. Like I said, it's a limited series. It has a 6 on IMDb, so your score matches that as an 83% off of 6 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. And there was a weird review from IGN that said, Hell Motel Review, Don't Check In. That's what it was titled, but it awarded it 6 out of 10 as well.
But said don't check in.
But it said don't check in.
Well, you wouldn't want to check into this hotel or motel.
Well, and also Aaron, Martin, and Ian Carpenter, the people that created Slasher and this. Martin wrote for 7 years episodes of Degrassi: The Next Generation, and got the story credit for
Is
the
that the
pilot.
one with Drake?
I think so. I believe so. And then also got the credit pilot for Essex County, that show that we did back in like 2023
That was
with
like
Kevin
a Canadian
Durant.
show, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
based on a comic, I think, and it had the lady from Doc in it. Yeah.
They've been around forever.
Yeah, but that's such a tame show. That was like the country and how people act towards one another. It
Right.
was like a friendship
It was
show.
not horror at all.
No one dies, not in this way. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.